I am Sarah Takota, the low-income housing tax credit allocation manager. We have with us today several of our partners with the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. It appears like we have several of our NIFA board members, a lot of NIFA staff, and I see a lot of familiar faces and partners that we work with every day. So we would ask that you go ahead and mute your microphone if you're able to. If we have time for any conversation later, we will definitely try to have a few moments for questions. If we don't, of course, you can always reach out to Pam or I, and our contact information is at the end of the presentation, as well as I mentioned, the Nebraska Department of Economic Development staff. If you have specific questions about community development block grant, DR, home funds, or housing trust funds. So we will make sure all of those comments are available, or all of that information is available for you. We will get started here. This is our revised QAP overview. So again, we have we've done this before, but we're calling this take two. We would like to really revisit and make sure everyone knows every time as an organization that we are coming up with ideas or solutions or programs, we're really focusing on our mission, growing Nebraska communities through affordable housing and agribusiness. And then our vision and our values. In everything we do, we are constantly talking about how are we using our core values every day. And those core values are commitment, integrity, collaboration, innovation, and stewardship. Those are, if you come to our office, you'll see them posted in everyone's cube or just anywhere around the office, because again, these are the things that as we do our daily work that we're thinking about, and making sure we're using those core values for any decisions that are made, and that there are guiding posts, as you might say. How we kind of got here today, and many of you have been following along, but initially, we had brought forth a qualified allocation plan, which when we talk about our QAP, that is all of our documents. That's the qualified allocation plan includes the 9% QAP, the 4% QAP, applications, anything like that. It's a large document. But we had put together a proposed QAP for the board for the October board meeting. At that point in time, there was some discussion that, maybe this particular QAP is not quite refined enough. It doesn't clearly state the board's policy objectives. And in addition, needed a little work to make sure that we get the gubernatorial support. So at that board meeting, if you were able to listen to it, there was a lot of discussion amongst our board members regarding what the specific policy objectives that they wanted to see addressed in the qualified allocation plan. They settled on 4: supporting collaboration and local strategies, incentivizing development across rural Nebraska, supporting family outcomes, opportunities, and quality of life, and then quality construction and stewardship. So when we go through our items today, we will talk a lot about those specific items. The first board policy objective, supporting collaboration and local strategies. You'll notice a lot of different colors on this PowerPoint, but if the if the items are listed in black, it's that they have been in place in previous QAPs. The items in blue were newly proposed for the last QAP, or for the first iteration of this QAP. And then in the gray box are our new proposed tactics. So supporting collaboration and local resources. Threshold alone is our threshold requirements alone create a lot of collaboration. A developer cannot go in and just build a development in a city without working with city officials, utility companies, economic development folks. There's a lot of collaboration that just comes into the items that they need to gather for threshold, which are minimum requirements to be eligible for a conditional reservation. Qualified census tract. In order to get points for building in a qualified census tract, it's always been that the development has to be in conjunction with a concerted community revitalization plan. However, what we have added a little bit more in this area is really spelled out what those plans need to have in them. And additionally, we added an additional point for larger developments, neighborhood plans, such as a choice neighborhood plan. Our CRANE program has always been about collaboration on many levels. Most of the time, the CRANE development serves special needs populations. So therefore, you're having a lot of public and private partnerships, whether it's through the actual development of the project or during the long-term running of the actual development with local organizations providing services. As I mentioned earlier, in the first iteration of the QAP, we added choice neighborhoods and RAD. Again, those are two processes that create that require a lot of local input and a lot of collaboration between different organizations. And then supportive services. We at our last the last QAP or the first iteration of this QAP, we put a requirement that at least one of the supportive services must be provided by a community or regional provider, so that it's, again, you're having, even in the long-term portion of the project development, that you are having that community collaboration. Preservation, our nonprofit set aside, the DED leadership community designation. Our friends at and our partners at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development have really told us a lot on how much work and collaboration between businesses and economic development groups and cities that it takes to receive that leadership community designation. So that's been in place for some years, but again, we like to point that out. And then project-based rental assistance too, because that is, again, an item that takes a lot of collaboration to be able to with your local housing authority to have the project-based vouchers on a development. So our new tactic that the board has recommended is incentivizing leverage and collaboration. So we are proposing that applicants who demonstrate efforts to collaborate and leverage the housing credit and NDED funding resources will be eligible for up to 4 additional points. And the way that we've laid that out, and again, this is an overview, so I really recommend you go and take a look at the red line application. There's also a clean copy of the application on the website to really see the breakdown. But to earn these points, you would need to have firm commitments from local governments, your private partners, charitable organizations, nonprofits, things like that, that do not have an identity of interest with the development. And then these points would be awarded on a percentage. They'd be a percentage that's calculated in relation to the total development points. So for example, to receive 1 point, you would need to illustrate leverage of between 5 and 9.99%. To receive 2 points, between 10 and 14.99%. 3 points, 15 and 19.99%, and then anything 20% above is 4 points. To give an idea of some eligible resources, again, we break down eligible and non-eligible resources in a chart. For example, eligible resource would be a capital contribution. A non-eligible resource would be NIFA or DED funding sources. Another example is community contributions from a city, whether it's home CDBG, TIF, LB 840, those would be eligible resources, but loans would not be eligible resources. Next, our next board policy objective is incentivizing development across rural Nebraska. We've talked about the challenges in recent years and at previous QAP of previous discussions regarding this QAP. We've talked about the trend of the way that things have been scored in the past. The housing efficiency points were compared metro versus non-metro, but in the end, everyone went to the same list and we went down scoring wise. And the policy in the past was you don't jump over a higher metro one in order to meet that 50-50 split with non-metro. So we found that the last 2 to 3 years have been trending very heavy non-metro. So what we have proposed this year, and again, this part is not new. This was just, this was in our previous iteration of the QAP, but we are changing our scoring, the way we are comparing our whole scoring process. So metro will be compared against metro, non-metro will be compared against non-metro, and then we will look at each pool when we're making those decisions to get to that 50-50 split. So there won't be a need to jump over anyone, and it'll be closer to a 50-50 split rather than very heavy one way or another. An additional tactic that we had added earlier this year was the small community points for non-metro only. So again, non-metro, by our definition, there's specific MSAs that we define, Omaha, Lincoln, South Sioux City. However, we still want to make sure that when we're talking about development in rural Nebraska, we're not just talking about the larger communities being, Grand Island and Kearney or North Platte, but that we're also incentivizing those communities that have smaller or have a lesser population or smaller population. So we did leave in the small community points, but for non-metro only. And then also, again, there are points, although there's not as many rural QCTs, there are points available in rural areas for QCTs developed with a concerted community revitalization plan also. So our new tactics, what we are proposing is the development under the heading that we're calling it is development of housing in Greater Nebraska. So there would be 2 points available for a development of at least 10 housing units in a community of 15,000 or less within the last 12 months. So again, we go into this a little bit deeper in the actual application, but if a developer is willing to go and build at least 10 housing units, whether it's owner occupied housing, rental housing, whatever type of housing it may be, for those who are income levels of 150% or lower. So it's not full market, but 150% fits in with a lot of our other programs. Then you would be eligible for a point, an additional point in your application. And again, it must be 10 home or rental units in order to qualify for that. And then we've also added development in conjunction with non-LIHTC housing opportunities for non-metro. Again, in non-metro areas, we're hearing from a lot of our stakeholders and partners that it's not just affordable housing that's needed. It's not just those that would hit the low-income housing tax credit income levels, but also some market rate housing. So there would be an opportunity for up to 2 points if the proposed application will be part of a larger market rate development of at least 6 market rate ownership or rental units. So this does not have to be done by the same developer. So it could be also a great example of collaboration between different developers, but it needs to be part of a larger subdivision or development. Again, these would need to be market rate development and not low-income housing units. And again, there'd be up to 2 points in that category, and that construction would have need to be done within the last 12 months. So the next board policy objective is supporting positive family outcomes, opportunities, and quality of life. And when we talk about families, we're not just talking about families with children. We're also talking about senior families and families of any type, any makeup, multi-generational families. Family can have many, many definitions. So we like to always keep that in mind. So again, what we had added in our previous draft this year is areas of high opportunity for metro areas. And those areas of high opportunity fall under 3 main indexes or indices. Education, health and environment is the second, and social and economic is the third. So there's points categories in the data that we are using this year. Each census tract has a rating between very low to very high. And so points are assigned, and we did make a few changes with those points since our last public hearing. Very low and low receive 0 points. Moderate, a project falling in a moderate category would receive 0.5 of a point. High would be 0.75, and very high would be 1 point. Now, an additional, we'll head on it. We'll talk about it here in a moment about an additional change that we did to this regarding, well, we'll cover it now. Makes sense. So a new tactic that we added just since the last board meeting is to add up to 1 additional point if in each of the 3 indices, the proposed development has a very high rating in each index. So that is brand new since the board meeting. Again, since the first drafts were posted, we have the family development where we're incentivizing development of larger units, additional amenities. We really, if anything, the last couple of years, we saw the importance of having, spaces for families to flex spaces for work or for study. So we did add work or study space as an amenity this year. And then additional supportive services with the focus of maintaining or encouraging self-sufficiency. And one of the things that we did was sat down with our compliance team and really looked at those services and talked about, we looked at the points. In the past, we said, you had to do 3 supportive services. But those 3 supportive services, some are very impactful to a tenant and some maybe less so. So we really sat down and talked about several things. We talked about what the impact and the value to the resident was. We did talk about costs, because one of the challenges is we want supportive services, but those supportive services cost money as the project goes on. That developer, they may find someone who can be a partner and provide a low cost supportive service, or in some cases free supportive service, but not all the time. So it does affect the long-term NOI of the project. So again, we're making sure that we want to find a right balance. So we went through, we changed the points value on a lot of the services, the supportive services options. And we lowered the required points for the supportive service category, with the idea of we wanted to have more impactful services, supportive services, rather than having someone put a ton of supportive services on a list and maybe some of them aren't impactful. So we're looking for quality over quantity, the impact over just more things to do. Our homeownership program, the Crown program, is a long-term rent-to-own program, and that's been around for many years. We also incentivize mixed income development. So again, that's nothing new, that's been around. If a developer commits to a certain percentage of market units mixed in with their low-income housing tax credit units, then they're incentivized with points. I mentioned earlier the inclusion of choice neighborhoods and the RAD program. Again, this is supporting positive family outcomes. And then senior housing has been in our application for many years. And you'll notice as I talk through this, we have a lot of overlap, because a lot of items not only will support family outcomes, but they also really incentivize collaboration. So we ultimately had to pick and put things under one area, but keeping in mind all the time that there is a lot of overlap in items that have impact in different categories. So I already talked about the areas of high opportunity in the additional new tactics, but we've had a couple more. New supportive services to encourage homeownership. We've always had a part of the Crown program, there's requirements for tenant down payment savings plans, but we've also added that as an option to any rental development. If someone is looking to transition from homeownership or from renting to homeownership, this will provide an ability to, the owner could choose this as an option and as a supportive service option, so that it would be easier to help with that down payment as they transition to homeownership. And then we added proximity to services for non-metro. We had received lots of comments about areas of high opportunity and how it should be applied both in metro and non-metro. We found that a little bit challenging, but we did want to incentivize those developments that are near proposed facilities like grocery stores, medical facilities, schools, parks, all of those things that can really enrich, enrich a person's life. If you're in a rural area and if you're not near a grocery store, that can be very challenging. Same thing with metro areas. And the metro areas in the area of high opportunity index actually measures those things. So we just wanted to break it down a little bit differently for non-metro. So there are up to 2 points for developments that are that are close to certain specific locations, grocery stores, as I mentioned, pharmacies, libraries, all that kind of thing. And they're divided in 4 categories, and each category can get 0.5 of a point. And again, we touched on the areas of high opportunity previously. Our next board objective is incentivizing quality construction, yet balancing that with stewardship of the credit. It's a challenge. We want to make sure we're stretching that credit as far as it can go and making good use of our credit. However, we want to make sure that those developments can last the long period of time that they are in as part of the tax credit program. It's a long-term commitment. So we have some things that are currently in the QAP. Probably one of the biggest tools is long-term compliance monitoring. Kelly Schultz and Tammy Bird and their team do physical inspections on a project and on a development, and as well as file inspections. So they're looking to make sure, number one, that the rules are being followed and the correct households are being served on the paperwork side of things. However, they're also looking at the physical condition of the apartment complex. So inside the units, they're looking to make sure that stoves work and there's nothing leaking, there's running water. I mean, they look at so many things. They look for tripping hazards, make sure that there's not any major holes or damage in the walls. So they have the IRS, thankfully, provides a specific guidelines that they have to follow. So they have a nice big book that they go through, but that's probably one of the key things, because if owners do not take care of those things, then they can get an 8823, which eventually, if it's not corrected, could lead to recapture of tax credits. So that's a big tool in making sure that we're being good stewards of the credit. Right now, our approach for designing green standards, we really try to find a balance between the being not too onerous with our requirements, but still trying to incentivize good design and green standards. And then our efficient housing production has been in place for many years. Last year, many of you may remember, we did decrease the value of the efficient housing production scores. Again, just to see, because we've heard many times that those efficient housing production scores were the main driver behind who received an award and who didn't. So last year, we reduced those by half. And again, so what we noticed, and we are looking forward to additional data on this, but what we noticed is while the efficient housing production was important, then that still was not the main, it didn't have as much weight, so that it was the only thing that we were looking at, right? Before, the points were very high. If you didn't score well in efficient housing production, then it was difficult to receive an award. So we wanted to just take that emphasis off of it being all about efficient housing. It's still important. It's just not the whole ballgame now. Property management requirements were changed, or availability for points were changed this year. Again, in previous, we rolled this out previously. We have, in the past, we just looked at a developer or property manager's track record in our state. We added new forms this year where we will communicate with other state agencies to see how that developer is doing in other states. So not just in Nebraska, but other states also. We also recognize the property management companies long-term, their success with managing the process, really managing, not only making sure, again, that there's qualified residents in the units, but making sure that the project is well maintained, and that the tenants have everything they need in good working order. So we put more focus on the property management company this year, because a lot of times they are the individuals who have the day-to-day contact with the residents. They're in the units. The maintenance people are seeing things, and they're the ones that are really, again, doing that day-to-day work. So we put a little bit more emphasis on that this year, which we've already talked about, but I wanted to touch on that. We also removed the density metric. In the past, we had some density points available, and ultimately, after some great public comments, we realized that perhaps those density metrics were not, they'd become stale. They had not grown with the time. So we decided that at this point in time that we would take those out because what they were, it wasn't necessarily meeting a board or policy objective. And so we wanted to take those out, and we will revisit that going forward if we feel that it's something that supports a board policy objective. Again, no changes, preservation, and then partnerships. Partnerships are huge in making sure that that a development is long-term, is going to be solid long-term. And when I talk about partnerships, I talk about Nebraska Department of Economic Development. They are a large part of, we are partners on this application. We work together on this application. And they also do long-term monitoring, and they also have requirements that are different than ours because of the different federal sources have different requirements. So a lot of times these properties are having inspections and requirements from several different parties. Syndicators are another good example. They often go out and take a look at the development. Some approve files even to make sure that applicants who are moving in meet the requirements. Lenders a lot of times. So we have a lot of partners that are also very active in making sure that the developments are that are being maintained as they should be and can last that 45 years. And then I mentioned it earlier with property management, but again, we added applicant and owner track record form also, again, to look at other states besides just Nebraska. So when we shared with the board some different tactics for looking at stewardship of the tax credit, some options that came about were, and the ones that were decided on, were to monitor the impact of the reduction in the efficiency points. As I mentioned, last year, we cut those points in half. We don't have a lot of data. We only have 1 year. And let's be real, this year has been very strange, just as the year before, because of supply chain issues. We've had a lot of uncertainty with costs and labor shortages. There's just been a lot going on. So it'd be really good to have another year to really look at the impact of that reduction. And then a recent item that was added is rewarding developers and owners who do not request additional tax credits from a previous conditional reservation. So if they have come in before and have had a project and they had to ask for additional credits, which we call supplemental credits after the award, then they would not be eligible for an additional point. But if they've come in and they did not request any credits, additional credits, then they would be eligible for an additional point. So that would be within the last 24 months. Ensuring quality construction. That is, again, a huge piece of making sure these developments are available, or that are properly taken care of and can withstand, what they need to and be in good condition and shape for 45 years. What was suggested was that NIFA over the next 12 months work with some expert consultants to develop design standards to ensure building quality. So we will have a specific requirements for the design standards. I think that many states do this, and it helps put everyone on exactly the same playing field. So we're looking forward to really working through that. Some additional items on the allocation plan.
What am I supposed to pick up?
It's a charcuterie. It's just a meat and cheese tray.
Some additional items on the allocation plan. We really wanted to showcase NIFA's mission, visions, values, and strategic objectives. So we've highlighted those in the allocation plan. And we've also included proposed scoring matrix by policy objective. So I indicated those, the 4 policy objectives, but then also there's some things that we are required by section 42 to incentivize development for the lowest income for the longest period of time. So there are some things that also fall under that category. Unfortunately, one of the challenges we had with the application not being approved in October was we had planned on having a December round for our low-income housing tax credit and bond only application. That's not timing wise, that does not work. Obviously it's too challenging. We don't know the exact timeline when the governor will be able to sign off on this. So it just did not work to have that. So one of the things we have done this year is proposed to only have 1 round each for the both the low-income housing tax credit and state credit with bond round, and then also the low-income housing tax credit with bond only round. So we hope that, and it is our plan to every year only have, in the next 2 years, to only have 1 of the rounds that has both state credits and the federal credit, but we had planned on having 2 for the LIHTC only. This year, again, because of the timing, which this is always very tricky because of the board meeting schedules and just getting overlapping all of the different scoring that has to be done throughout the year. So we are proposing the first application round. We'll have a pre-application, which is required, but then optional threshold review on February 18th, a final full application due on March 18th. And then the conditional reservations would be proposed, or the conditional allocations would be proposed at the April board meeting. In 2023, there would be we're not proposing any changes at this point in time to those rounds. Proposed volume cap, we are approximately, again, this is approximately proposing 35 million in the low-income housing tax credit round with state credits, and then 35 million for the low-income housing tax credit only round. I would note that this year, since we are only doing 1 round in the LIHTC only category, we, of course, if there's additional volume cap left after the recommendations in April, we of course want to make good use of that. So this year, again, because of unusual circumstances with timing, and I think those who have been working on, we have several people this year that are working on closing bonds prior to the end of the year, and the timing needed to get all of that done. What we're proposing is something a little different than we have done in the past, but it would be those who applied in the first round. So if there's volume cap available under the LIHTC and tax exempt bond process only, if there's any left available, those who applied in the first round and did not receive a conditional allocation would be invited to participate in sort of an accelerated timeline process in order to look at, again, making sure we commit, we're able to make good use of those resources. So anyone who did not receive a conditional allocation would be invited to resubmit their application, the final full application on May 9th, and then we would have a conditional allocation available at the June board meeting. And again, this is only in the event that not all the resources are used. We also added Appendix D to the qualified allocation plan, and that just spells out, we've had a policy in place of how we've handled the additional tax credit requests, but we didn't address it in the QAP. So we wanted to memorialize that actual process in writing. So that's been added as Appendix D to the QAP. I'd make sure to take a look at that. And then we've touched on some of these before, but for the qualified census tract requirement, if points are being sought, again, there must be, it can't just be in a qualified census tract and get points. It has to be, the development has to be in an area that has a concerted community revitalization plan. So we just provided some more guidance on what that plan needs to include, and then how it needs to, what needs to be submitted to illustrate that. Right of first refusal, since the last publication of the QAP in October, we did clarify the language a bit on right of first refusal, and a lot has to do with related parties there, so we clarified that language. In addition, some of the language on the track record forms, the new track record forms were just updated a little bit because they were, it was a little confusing. So we updated that language. There's been some clarification to owner paid supportive services. Again, we want to incentivize partnerships with nonprofits and different organizations. So we clarified that language a little bit. And then a new requirement with CRANE, because the CRANE program, those developments are serving, mostly serving special needs populations. We have added the requirement that any project going into CRANE must meet the targeting gross rent categories. They must score points in all of those categories. And then, as usual, we always have additional cleanup of language, format, punctuation. I don't know how many times we look at this thing and you'd think that we'd catch things, but when you look at it so many times and we have so many people look at it, there's still something that we'll miss, a comma or something like that. So we, of course, are constantly doing, not substantive changes, but making sure we're just cleaning up little things, spelling, formatting. So contact information, again, all of these documents are posted on our website under the forms and documents page. And then you can also find videos of the public hearings, of this session, also on our education and training page under the tax credit section. So we've got, again, Pam and I's contact information. And I can't stress enough how important that it is to get public comment on these changes and on the QAP as a whole. We really appreciate that. The board appreciates it. It helps us tremendously. So our public hearing is this Friday. So if you can please provide public hearing in writing, if you'd like, before the meeting on Friday, that would be fantastic. You can email it to myself and Pam so that we can have that and gather that all together. Our next process after the public hearing is we meet with our partners at the Department of Economic Development and then work through any other changes resulting from the tax or from the public hearing. And then we also work with our programs committee to propose any changes and talk about any changes, again, resulting from the public comment received at the public hearing. After we meet with all of those parties, then we will post the new draft online. And again, there will you will have time to review that before that goes to the board. So the board also has plenty of time to review that. And again, we're hoping, again, we'll be having a November board meeting, which is, oh, I'm sorry, no, December 10th, I believe is our next board meeting. No November board meeting. I'm trying to make it too quick. But our next board meeting will be in December 10th. So I would like to ask Christina, if I don't know, Christina, if you are Christina Zink from the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, if you have any information that you would like to chat about, Christina works with the CDBG-DR program. But if you'd like to provide any updates, that would be great.
Yes, we have been working with our consultants over the last couple weeks and months to get more information on our policies and procedures and grant requirements. So we'll be launching those here soon and posting them. We are going to have a couple webinars on the program, especially for the Affordable Construction Program coming up later this month on Monday, November 29th. One at 2 o'clock and one at 5:15. And so I would encourage everyone to visit our website and sign up for that update. And so you can register for those hearings and learn more about the program and where we are. So I kind of put in the chat there links to our project toolbox and where you can find the registration link for our November webinar.
Christina, appreciate it. I don't, Michelle or Cheryl, I don't know if you had any updates. I know last time we talked, I think you were good, but if you'd like, if you have anything that's changed between now and then, please feel free to chime in. Okay, it looks like there's no updates from Michelle, and Michelle has the at the Department of Economic Development. So thank you everybody for coming today and taking part and listening to a highlight of our changes. Again, I can't stress enough, there's been so many changes this year. When you're looking at those red line documents, they can be overwhelming. Some of it was just moving things around even to try to make more sense and try to make the flow a little bit better so that you don't have to submit duplicate information in different exhibits. Because of that, and then all of the other policy changes, we recognize that it is a challenge to pick out those specific changes. So again, I really recommend taking a look at both the clean and the red line versions of the QAP and the application specifically to make sure that you are able to really get a good picture of all the changes. We tried to highlight many of them today. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Pam and I are available for questions. And please feel free to reach out. And again, any public comments, please provide it if you can prior to the meeting. Again, the IRS guidelines they have not extended the ability for Section 42 to have virtual public hearings. So we will have the public hearing available for those to listen to. But again, unfortunately, we can't take public comment virtually. So if you have it, you're not going to be able to attend on Friday, please email it to me. And if you specifically want me to read it into record, I certainly can do that. Otherwise, we will provide copies of all of the public comments, both that we've received in writing and a summary of that in documents on the website following, as soon as we can, following the actual public hearing. Again, thank you very much, everyone. Feel free to reach out and contact us if you have any questions. Thank you. Have a great day.